There were a few others who, although they were not prepared in professional scholarship and did not have professional positions, still proved on special topics to make contributions that were not trivial. It may be noted that the stimuli for most Book of Mormon studies up until the 1970s and 80s were topics or problems, quotes, raised by non-scholarly, anti-Book of Mormon critics. They raised the problems, we tended to respond. But increasingly over the last 40 years, original questions have more often been addressed. Topics that have seemed worth intellectual probing for their own sakes, rather than as responses to criticism. For instance, my own work on Mesoamerican geographical and cultural context for the Nephites has never been prompted by the concerns of critics. Probably the most influential original study in the early period of this growth was Jack Welch's recognition of the chiasmus literary style. By the present day, most Book of Mormon scholarship is pursued without regard to whether anti-Mormons raise the issues or not. The pioneering efforts had only limited effect upon Latter-day Saints because of lack of publishing outlets. Up until about 1950, I believe that all scholarly Book of Mormon studies that were of permanent value could have been accommodated on a shelf no more than 3 feet long. Lack of publishing outlets depended in turn on the lack of readers, or more realistically, the lack of book buyers. As the number of graduates from church educational institutions increased in subsequent decades, however, not only has scholarly literacy grown in the reader community, but also the economic means in the hands of a growing number of readers has spurred further publishing of serious Book of Mormon studies. Those who have memory enough of an older day may just cast your minds back on what the fair bookstore would have looked like in 1950. Probably one small desk is all that would have been required. Our perspectives on the trajectory of Book of Mormon research can be better focused by citing examples, but let me pause to say a word about why I use the term trajectory. I suppose that there is a path, a definite path, almost a life history, growth, birth, growth, on to maturity, and that Book of Mormon studies are on that trajectory or that path, growing toward maturity. I don't think it's mature yet. It may be adolescent, but it's definitely beyond childhood. And I think when I was referring to the three fathers, Sperry, Jakeman, and Nibley, they were close to the birth of genuine scholarship. Each of the cases that or incidents, examples that I'm going to give, has significance in that it illustrates the use of a novel concept or analytical tool to the Book of Mormon case. That is, in each case, the author of the study has taken a notion, a tool, or a set of ideas that has been successful in treating the Iliad, or the Bible, or English literature, or whatever, some other area, and it seems to shed light. And they say, if we applied that to the Book of Mormon, would we also get light? Yes. It's all borrowing. Few or none of us ever invent entirely new tools or concepts. Our strength and the strength and utility of all scholarship or science is borrowing and adapting effectively whatever means have proved useful elsewhere. Here are selected examples that could easily be multiplied. When I started to list the possibilities initially, it was easy to get up to 50, 75 cases, so I've just selected a few arbitrarily. Case, word print studies. They were first used to examine issues of disputed scholarship in secular literature, Shakespearean studies and whatnot. John Hilton was one of the first to realize the potential of this tool for examining the question of who wrote the Book of Mormon. Since then, there have been, of course, further studies. Wells Jakeman first suggested in 1952 that volcanoes in Central America, could explain aspects of the Great Destruction of 3rd Nephi. Subsequently, geologists Koalas and Bayer, among others, have expanded on that notion and have been able to take advantage of data from an increasing number of cases known from history and archaeology. Another case, once there was, among Latter-day Saints, only general recognition of and commentary on the religious significance of King Benjamin's sermon. Then Nibley, followed by Ricks and others, saw value in adapting the model of the coronation of Israelite and other Near Eastern monarchs and applying that to the coronation of Mosiah. And they learned some important things about the Benjamin incident by borrowing from the tradition in Near Eastern regal studies. And this has led them to consideration of other festivals and ceremonial occasions in the ancient Near East that also are reflected in the Book of Mormon. At one time, the olive tree in the Book of Mormon was a subject only for doctrinal and historical discussion, but now Jacob's allegory of the olive tree has become a substantial subfield of interest in which an interesting variety of scholars have worked. Sperry originally conceived of and termed 2 Nephi 4 the Psalm of Nephi. Later scholars, such as Rust, Perry, and Angela Kroll, have had much more to say about this passage and about many other instances of poetry in the Book of Mormon in light of scholarly studies of Hebrew literature. Now, a great deal is known, but by no means exhausted, about poetry in the Book of Mormon. Nibley was effectively the first to recognize that ethnographic, descriptive, people descriptive, and historical parallels drawn from studies on the Near East, both ancient and modern, are found in 1 Nephi's description of Nephi's report. This is one of the largest subfields of Book of Mormon studies, and it shows no signs of having been exhausted. There's a long history of misguided Latter-day Saint claims for parallels between archaeology and the Native American historical traditions on the one hand, and the Nephite record on the other, starting with the interpreting of Stephen's book in Nauvoo over 160 years ago. All of those suggestions have proved badly flawed. Only in the last few decades has LDS students' mastery of the complex literature, the reports of the anthropology of ancient America, been sufficient to justify applying usefully archaeological and ethnographic models to Book of Mormon studies. Textual study of the Book of Mormon that began as early as Thomas Brookbank has been greatly increased to culminate so far in the work of Royal Skousen. But I think he would be the first to recognize that he has not done all the work there is to be done. Nibley's first identification of Egyptian proper names in the Book of Mormon has been expanded as others have continued the search in Near Eastern languages, and the end has been by no means reached yet. Starting with Sperry's handful of examples, the identified Hebraisms in the text of the Book of Mormon by now number hundreds. Surely others will be located and analyzed as time goes on. There are many more, and I will not